The sun dipped low over Cottonwood Creek, Montana Territory, casting long shadows across the dusty main street as Olivia Thornton stood outside Barker's general store with trembling hands, her golden wedding band glinting in the amber light. The tears streaming down her face caught the attention of Owen McCall, who had just dismounted his chestnut mare at the hitching post. He paused, one boot on the boardwalk, watching as the young widow tried to exchange her most precious possession for a sack of flour and medicine. It was the spring of 1878, and Owen had spent the better part of the last decade driving cattle across the unforgiving plains of the Montana Territory. At 32, his weathered face and calloused hands told the story of a man who had chosen the hardship of the open range over the comforts of settled life. The leather of his chaps creaked as he shifted his weight, contemplating the scene before him. "Madam, I'm sorry, but this ring ain't worth more than $3 in trade," Mr. Barker said, pushing the wedding band back across the wooden counter toward Tessa Thornton. "Please," Tessa whispered, her voice breaking. "My boy's got the fever, something awful. I need the medicine and food to last us through the week." Owen studied her from beneath the brim of his hat. She couldn't have been more than 25, with honey-brown hair escaping from a simple bun at the nape of her neck. Her calico dress had been mended several times, but she wore it with dignity despite her desperate circumstances. $8, Barker repeated, shaking his head. "That's what the medicine and supplies come to. Your ring don't cover half of it." Owen cleared his throat and stepped forward. "I'll pay the difference." Both Barker and Tessa turned to look at him. Surprise flickered across Tessa's tear-stained face, followed quickly by wariness. "I don't take charity from strangers, sir," she said, lifting her chin despite the quiver in her voice. Owen removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair. "No charity, madam. Just neighborly assistance." He stepped closer, reaching into his pocket for a handful of coins. He counted out $5 and placed them on the counter beside her ring. "There," he said. "That should cover it." Barker looked from Owen to Tessa, then shrugged and scooped up the money. "I'll get your supplies, Mrs. Thornton." As Barker turned away, Owen picked up the simple gold band. It was worn thin from years of wear, a testament to a life shared with someone who was now gone. "This belongs to you," he said softly, taking her left hand in his. Before she could protest, he slipped the ring back onto her finger. "Some things are worth more than their weight in gold." Tessa stared at him, her blue eyes wide with confusion and gratitude. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Owen shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "I've been riding alone for too long, I reckon. Sometimes a man needs to remember there's more to life than just surviving." A small smile trembled on her lips. "I'm Tessa Thornton." "Owen McCall," he replied with a slight nod. "Pleased to make your acquaintance." Barker returned with a bundle of supplies and a small bottle of medicine. "Here you are, Mrs. Thornton. That'll be $8. He winked at Owen as he took the money. "Good to see you back in these parts, McCall." Owen helped Tessa load the supplies into her small wagon parked outside. A rickety affair pulled by an aging mule, it looked barely fit for the journey ahead. "How far do you have to go?" Owen asked, frowning at the wobbling wheel. "About 3 miles east, near Willow Creek," she answered, securing the last of her packages. Owen glanced at the darkening sky. "That's a fair piece to travel alone, especially with nightfall coming." Tessa's hands stilled on the rope she was tying. "I don't have much choice. My boy Thomas is home alone, sick with fever." Worry creased her brow. "Mrs. Hollister from the next homestead was sitting with him, but she has her own family to tend to by evening." Owen nodded, decision made. "I'll ride alongside you then. Make sure you get home safe." "That's not necessary." "It is," he insisted, untying his horse. Montana nights are no place for a woman traveling alone. Reluctantly, Tessa climbed onto the wagon seat and picked up the reins. "Thank you, Mr. McCall." "Owen," he corrected, swinging into his saddle. "Just Owen." As they left town, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the landscape. The rolling plains stretched out before them, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. Spring had come early this year, bringing with it a lushness to the land that had been absent during the harsh winter months. "How long have you been on your own, Mrs. Thornton?" Owen asked after they had traveled in silence for some time. Tessa's hands tightened on the reins. "Nearly a year now. My husband, James, took ill last summer. Consumption. It took him quick." She spoke matter-of-factly, but Owen could hear the pain beneath her words. "I'm sorry for your loss." She nodded, keeping her eyes on the trail ahead. "We came out here from Pennsylvania 5 years ago. James had dreams of building a cattle ranch." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Dreams don't always pan out the way you expect." "No," Owen agreed quietly. "They surely don't. And you, Mr. McCall? What brings you to Cottonwood Creek?" Owen adjusted his hat against the setting sun. "I drive cattle for the Blackwater outfit. Been with them going on 9 years now. We just brought a herd up from Texas. Delivered them to the Circle M ranch south of here." He paused. "Thought I'd take a few days before heading back." Tessa glanced at him curiously. "No family waiting for you?" "None to speak of," he replied. "My parents passed when I was young, raised by my uncle until I was old enough to make my own way." They fell into a companionable silence as the wagon creaked along the rutted trail. The first stars were appearing in the eastern sky by the time they turned onto a narrow path that led to a small cabin nestled against a stand of willows. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and a flickering light shone from the single window. "Mrs. Hollister must have lit the lamps before she left," Tessa said, relief evident in her voice as she urged the mule forward. The cabin was modest but well built, with a small barn and corral to one side. A vegetable garden, recently turned for spring planting, stretched behind the house. Owen could see that despite her hardships, Tessa had worked hard to maintain the homestead. As they pulled up to the cabin, the door burst open, and an elderly woman appeared, her gray hair escaping from a severe bun. "Tessa, thank the Lord you're back," she called, hurrying down the steps. "The boy's fever broke about an hour ago. He's been asking for you." Tessa leaped from the wagon, gathering her skirts. "Oh, Mrs. Hollister, thank you for staying with him." "Nonsense, child. I wasn't about to leave him alone." The older woman's sharp eyes turned to Owen. "And who might this be?" "Owen McCall, madam," he said, tipping his hat. "Just making sure Mrs. Thornton got home safe." Mrs. Hollister's eyebrows rose as she looked between them. "Well, that was mighty kind of you, Mr. McCall." There was a knowing glint in her eye that made Owen shift uncomfortably in his saddle. "I should be going," he said, turning his horse. "Glad to hear your boy's on the mend, Mrs. Thornton." "Wait," Tessa called, her hand outstretched. "Please, at least come in for some coffee before you ride back to town in the dark." Owen hesitated, aware of Mrs. Hollister's curious gaze. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's the least I can do to thank you," Tessa insisted. "Please." After a moment's consideration, Owen nodded and dismounted. "Much obliged." Mrs. Hollister helped Tessa unload the supplies while Owen tended to his horse and the mule, unsaddling his mount and making sure both animals had water and feed for the night. By the time he entered the cabin, Mrs. Hollister was pulling on her shawl to leave. "You take care now, Tessa," the older woman said, patting her arm. "I'll check in on you tomorrow." She nodded to Owen on her way out. "Good evening, Mr. McCall." The interior of the cabin was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace at one end and a curtained-off sleeping area at the other. A rough-hewn table with 4 chairs occupied the center of the main room, and a rocking chair sat by the fire. The smell of herbs and pine filled the air, mingling with the aroma of a stew that simmered in a pot over the hearth. "Thomas is sleeping," Tessa said quietly, moving to the fireplace to hang a kettle for coffee. "The fever really has broken. Thank God." Owen stood awkwardly, hat in hand, until Tessa gestured for him to sit at the table. "Please, make yourself comfortable." He pulled out a chair and sat, placing his hat on the table beside him. "You've made a good home here." Tessa smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, bringing a sparkle to her blue eyes that made Owen's breath catch unexpectedly. "James built it with his own hands," she said, pride evident in her voice. "We arrived with nothing but a wagon full of supplies and big dreams." Her smile dimmed slightly. "He worked so hard to make this place what it is. And now you're keeping it going," Owen observed. "That takes courage." Tessa busied herself with the coffee, spooning grounds into a pot and adding the boiling water. "Not courage so much as necessity. Thomas and we've nowhere else to go. This is our home." The mention of her son prompted Owen to ask, "How old is your boy?" "7, she replied, bringing 2 steaming cups to the table. "He's a good child, smart as a whip and growing like a weed." She sat across from him, cradling her cup between her hands. "It's been hard on him, losing his father." Owen nodded, understanding all too well the pain of losing a parent at a young age. "Children are resilient. With a mother like you, he'll grow up strong." Tessa's cheeks colored at the compliment, and she quickly changed the subject. "How long will you be in Cottonwood Creek?" "Not sure," Owen admitted, sipping the strong, bitter coffee. "The trail boss gave us a week's leave before we head back to Texas. Most of the boys are spending their wages at the saloon." He shrugged. "Never been one for much drinking or gambling myself." "So what do you do with your time off?" Owen considered the question. "Mostly just enjoy not being in the saddle from sunup to sundown." He smiled ruefully. "Sleep in a real bed. Eat food that wasn't cooked over a campfire." "Sounds like a hard life," Tessa observed. "It has its moments," he agreed. "But there's something about being out on the open range, moving with the herd, sleeping under the stars. It gets in your blood." They talked as they finished their coffee, the conversation flowing easily between them. Owen found himself telling her about the cattle drive, about the men he worked with, about the beauty and danger of the trail. Tessa listened intently, asking questions that showed a genuine interest in his life. In turn, she shared stories of her journey west with James, of the hardships and joys of building a life from nothing, of her son's antics that made her laugh despite her grief. Owen found himself charmed by her resilience, her quiet strength, and the way her face lit up when she spoke of Thomas. A small voice from behind the curtain interrupted their conversation. "Mama!" Tessa was on her feet instantly, moving to the curtained alcove. "I'm here, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" Owen remained at the table, feeling suddenly intrusive as he listened to the murmured conversation between mother and son. After a few moments, Tessa reappeared. "He's asking for a drink of water," she explained, moving to fill a cup. "I should go," Owen said, standing and reaching for his hat. "It's getting late, and you need to tend to your boy." Tessa hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you again for your help today, and for the company." Owen moved toward the door, then paused. "Mrs. Thornton, Tessa, if you don't mind me asking, how are you managing the homestead on your own?" She straightened her shoulders, pride evident in her posture despite the weariness in her eyes. "We get by. I sell eggs in town and some of my preserves. Mrs. Hollister's son helps with the heavy work when he can spare the time. Owen nodded, turning his hat in his hands. I've got some time before I need to head back south. If you could use an extra pair of hands around here, I'd be happy to help. Surprise flashed across Tessa's face, followed by wariness. That's very kind, but I couldn't ask that of you. You're not asking. I'm offering. Owen met her gaze steadily. No strings attached, just one neighbor helping another. Tessa studied him for a long moment, as if trying to discern his true intentions. Finally, she said, the barn roof needs patching before the spring rains come in earnest, and the corral fence has seen better days. Owen smiled, setting his hat back on his head. I'll be by tomorrow morning then, around 8. We'll have breakfast waiting, Tessa replied, a tentative smile tugging at her lips. As Owen rode back to town under a canopy of stars, he found himself wondering what had possessed him to make such an offer. He had planned to spend his week of leave resting and preparing for the long journey back to Texas. Instead, he had committed himself to manual labor on a widow's homestead. And yet, the thought of seeing Tessa again tomorrow brought a warmth to his chest that had nothing to do with the spring night. There was something about her quiet dignity, her determination to provide for her son despite overwhelming odds that resonated with him in a way he hadn't experienced before. Owen spent the night at the modest boarding house in Cottonwood Creek, rising with the sun. After a quick breakfast in the town's only cafe, he purchased some tools and supplies, loading them onto his horse before heading east toward the Thornton homestead. The morning was crisp and clear, with dew sparkling on the grass and wildflowers dotting the prairie. By the time Owen arrived at the small cabin, smoke was rising from the chimney, and he could see Tessa in the garden, already at work despite the early hour. She straightened as he approached, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good morning, Mr. McCall." "Morning, Mrs. Thornton," he replied, dismounting. "Hope I'm not too early." "Not at all. Thomas is just setting the table for breakfast." She gestured toward the house. "Would you mind unsaddling your horse first? There's a stall in the barn you can use." Owen nodded, leading his mount toward the weathered structure. As he entered the dim interior, he took stock of the barn's condition. The roof had several spots where daylight shone through, and the supporting beams showed signs of water damage. It would take more than a day's work to make the necessary repairs. After settling his horse, Owen returned to the cabin to find Tessa and a small boy waiting for him. Thomas Thornton was thin but bright-eyed, his mother's features reflected in his young face. He regarded Owen with curious apprehension. "Thomas, this is Mr. McCall," Tessa said, her hand on her son's shoulder. "He's going to help us with some repairs around the homestead." "Are you a real cowboy?" Thomas asked, his eyes wide. Owen smiled, crouching down to the boy's level. "I reckon I am. I drive cattle from Texas all the way up to Montana." Thomas's face lit up with excitement. Pa was going to be a rancher. He was going to have 100 cows. A shadow crossed Tessa's face, but she smiled gently at her son. "That's right. And now Mr. McCall is going to help us fix the barn roof so we can keep our chickens and Daisy dry when it rains." "Daisy's our milk cow," Thomas informed Owen solemnly. "She gives us milk every morning." "Is that so?" Owen replied, equally serious. "Well, we can't have Daisy getting wet, can we?" Breakfast was simple but hearty cornmeal mush with molasses, biscuits with butter, and strong coffee. Thomas peppered Owen with questions about trail driving, cowboys, and horses, his earlier shyness forgotten in his enthusiasm. "Can you shoot a gun?" the boy asked between mouthfuls. "Thomas," Tessa admonished, "that's not proper breakfast conversation." Owen chuckled. "It's all right. Yes, Thomas, I can shoot. Every cowboy needs to know how to handle a firearm, but mostly to protect the herd from predators." Like wolves. Thomas's eyes were wide. Sometimes wolves, Owen agreed. But more often it's to scare off rustlers, men who try to steal cattle. Have you ever shot a rustler? The boy was practically bouncing in his seat. Thomas, that's enough, Tessa said firmly. Mr. McCall is here to help with the barn, not to tell stories about shooting people. Owen caught her eye across the table, understanding her concern. Your mother's right, Thomas. A gun is a tool, not a toy, and taking a human life is a serious matter. Most problems can be solved without violence. The boy looked slightly disappointed but nodded. Yes, sir. After breakfast, Owen and Tessa stood outside the barn, assessing the work that needed to be done. Thomas had been sent to gather eggs from the chicken coop, a task he approached with the seriousness of a much older child. The roof's the priority, Tessa said, shielding her eyes against the morning sun as she looked up at the barn. If we get another heavy rain before it's fixed, we might lose the whole structure. Owen nodded, already planning the repairs in his mind. I brought some tar paper and nails. We'll need to replace some of the shingles entirely, but I can shore up the worst spots today. I can't pay you for the supplies, Tessa said quietly, her fingers unconsciously twisting the wedding ring on her finger. I'm not asking for payment, Owen replied. Consider it an investment in good neighbors. Tessa looked up at him, searching his face. Why are you really doing this, Mr. McCall? You don't know us. You could be spending your time off relaxing in town. Owen considered his answer carefully. Maybe I've spent too many years drifting, Mrs. Thornton. When you live your life on the move, you start to wonder what it might be like to put down roots somewhere. He paused. Helping you feels right, that's all. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Owen felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared loneliness. Tessa broke the gaze first, turning back toward the barn. Well then, she said briskly, we'd best get started. There's a ladder inside. The day passed in steady work. Owen focused on the barn roof, carefully replacing damaged shingles and patching holes with the tar paper he'd brought. Tessa worked alongside him, handing up tools and supplies as needed, her capable hands never idle. By midday, the spring sun had warmed the air considerably, and Owen had shed his jacket, working in his shirt sleeves. From his perch on the roof, he could see Thomas in the garden, diligently pulling weeds and chattering to himself. The boy had recovered remarkably well from his fever, though Owen noticed he tired more quickly than a healthy child might. He's a good worker, Owen commented when Tessa brought him a dipper of cool water from the well. She smiled, following his gaze to where Thomas was now chasing a butterfly through the rows of newly turned earth. He tries so hard to be the man of the house. Sometimes I forget he's only 7. You're doing a fine job with him, Owen said. Not every child would take to chores with such enthusiasm. He knows what's at stake, Tessa replied softly. He understands that if we don't work, we don't eat. She sighed. It's not the childhood I wanted for him. Owen handed back the dipper, their fingers brushing momentarily. Life rarely turns out as planned, Mrs. Thornton, but children are resilient. He has a loving mother and a safe home. That's more than many can claim. Tessa nodded, blinking rapidly before composing herself. Dinner will be ready in about an hour. Don't work too long in this heat. As she walked away, Owen found his gaze lingering on her retreating figure. There was something compelling about Tessa Thornton, a quiet strength that drew him to her despite his better judgment. She was a widow still wearing her wedding ring, still honoring the memory of her husband. And he was a drifter, a man with no home and no prospects beyond the next cattle drive. Yet as he returned to his work, hammering nails into the sun-warmed wood of the barn roof, Owen felt more at peace than he had in years. The simple rhythm of the work, the clear purpose of his actions, The knowledge that he was helping someone who truly needed it, all of it settled something restless within him. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Owen had patched the worst of the roof. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would hold through the spring rains. Tomorrow, he would tackle the corral fence and perhaps begin reinforcing the barn's supporting beams. Dinner was a simple affair: rabbit stew with vegetables from last year's garden stores, and more of Tessa's fresh-baked biscuits. Thomas, tired from his day of helping in the garden, could barely keep his eyes open as he ate. "I think someone's ready for bed," Tessa said gently, ruffling her son's hair. "But I want to hear more of Mr. McCall's stories," Thomas protested, even as he yawned widely. "Perhaps tomorrow," Owen suggested. "I've got plenty more tales of the trail, but they'll keep until you're rested." After Tessa had tucked Thomas into bed, she rejoined Owen by the fire. The evening had turned cool, and the warmth of the hearth was welcome after a day of physical labor. "Thank you for your work today," Tessa said, settling into the rocking chair with a mending basket. "The barn already looks better." Owen, seated in a straight-backed chair near the fire, nodded. "It's a good, solid structure. Just needs some care to see it through another decade or two." They fell into comfortable conversation as Tessa worked on patching a pair of Thomas's trousers. Owen found himself captivated by the deft movements of her hands, the way the firelight caught in her hair, the occasional smile that softened her features when their discussion turned to lighter topics. "How did you come to be a cowboy?" she asked after a while, her needle flashing in the firelight. Owen stretched his legs toward the hearth, feeling the pleasant ache of a day's good work in his muscles. "By accident, mostly. After my parents died, my uncle raised me on his small farm in Missouri. When I was 19, he passed, and the farm went to his son." He shrugged. "My cousin offered to let me stay on as a hired hand, but I wanted to see more of the world." "So you headed west," Tessa said, nodding. "Found work with a cattle outfit heading up from Texas. Learned the trade on the job." Owen smiled at the memory. "Nearly got myself killed a dozen times that first drive, but I took to it. Been doing it ever since." "Do you ever think of settling down?" The question was innocent enough, but Owen caught the quick dart of her eyes to his face and then away again. "Sometimes," he admitted. "More often lately." A man reaches a certain age, starts to wonder if there might be more to life than dusty trails and sleeping under the stars. He paused, watching the flames dance in the hearth. But it would take the right situation, the right place, the right person, he thought but didn't say. Tessa set her mending aside, her fingers absently twisting her wedding ring. "James and I were childhood sweethearts. Married when I was 18, just before we set out west. Sometimes it feels like I've never known any other life." "You loved him very much," Owen observed quietly. "I did. I still do." Her voice was soft, tinged with memory. "But lately, I've been wondering, is it possible to honor what was while still moving forward?" She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Is it disloyal to want more than memories to keep me warm at night?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with meaning that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Owen felt his heart quicken, aware that her words offered a glimpse into her most private thoughts. "I think," he said carefully, "that loving someone means wanting their happiness above all else. If James loved you as much as I believe he did, he wouldn't want you to live the rest of your life alone." Tessa held his gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then she nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Thank you for saying that." The mantel clock chimed 9, breaking the spell of the moment. Owen rose, aware that to stay longer would push the boundaries of propriety. "I should head back to town," he said, reaching for his hat. "But I'll return in the morning to work on that corral fence." Tessa walked him to the door. You're welcome to use the lean to behind the barn if you'd prefer not to ride back and forth. It's not much, but there's a cot and it's dry. Owen considered the offer. Staying on the homestead would allow him to start work earlier and accomplish more. It would also mean being closer to Tessa and Thomas. If you're sure it wouldn't be an imposition, he said. Not at all. In fact. She hesitated, then continued. It would be a comfort, having someone else on the property, especially at night. Owen understood the unspoken concern. A woman and child alone on an isolated homestead were vulnerable in ways that went beyond broken barn roofs and sagging fences. Then I'll bring my things tomorrow, he said. Good night, Tessa. Good night, Owen, she replied, his name soft on her lips. And thank you. As he rode back to town under a sky brilliant with stars, Owen found himself contemplating possibilities he hadn't considered before. For 9 years, he had defined himself by his work, by the endless cycle of cattle drives and brief respites in between. He had never allowed himself to imagine a different kind of life. Now, the image of Tessa by the firelight, her hands busy with mending, her voice soft as she spoke of her late husband, had planted a seed in his mind. A dangerous seed, perhaps, given the circumstances, but one that had taken root nonetheless. The next morning, Owen checked out of the boarding house and loaded his few possessions onto his horse. He made a stop at the general store, purchasing additional supplies for the repairs at the Thornton homestead, as well as some penny candy for Thomas and a small package of tea for Tessa. When he arrived at the cabin, Thomas was already outside, feeding chickens that pecked industriously around his feet. The boy's face lit up when he spotted Owen. Mr. McCall, you came back, he exclaimed, abandoning his chore to run toward the approaching rider. Said I would, didn't I? Owen replied, dismounting. A man's word is his bond, Thomas. Remember that. Tessa appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair was neatly braided and coiled at the nape of her neck, but a few tendrils had escaped to frame her face. The sight of her made Owen's heart beat a little faster. Good morning, she called. Breakfast is nearly ready. Mama made flapjacks, Thomas informed him solemnly. Because it's Saturday. Owen smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. Is that so? Well, I'd best get my horse settled quickly, then. Wouldn't want to miss Saturday flapjacks. The morning passed in a comfortable routine. After breakfast, Owen showed Thomas how to mix whitewash for the corral fence while Tessa worked in the garden. The boy proved to be an eager apprentice, asking thoughtful questions and following instructions carefully. My pa was teaching me to be a rancher, Thomas said as they stirred the thick, white mixture. Before he got sick. Owen nodded, understanding the boy's need to connect his present to the father he had lost. He taught you well. You've got a good head on your shoulders. Do you think we'll ever have cattle? Thomas asked, his young face serious. Like Pa wanted? Owen considered his answer carefully. I think anything's possible if you work hard and don't give up. Your ma's a determined woman, and you're growing into a fine young man. Thomas absorbed this, nodding thoughtfully. If we had cattle, would you stay and help us? Since you're a cowboy and know all about cows. The innocent question caught Owen off guard. Well, now that would be up to your mother, wouldn't it? And besides, I've got obligations with the outfit I work for. But you like it here, don't you? Thomas persisted. I can tell. You smile more when you look at Mama. Owen felt heat rise to his face, grateful that Tessa was out of earshot. Your Mama is a fine woman who's doing her best for you. I respect that a great deal. Thomas seemed satisfied with this answer, turning his attention back to the whitewash. But his words lingered in Owen's mind as they moved on to repairing the corral fence. The boy was observant, perhaps too observant for Owen's comfort. By midday, the spring sun had warmed the air considerably, and Owen had removed his jacket, working in his shirt sleeves. The fence was coming along nicely, with Thomas proudly applying whitewash to each repaired section. Tessa brought them water from the well, her cheeks flushed from her work in the garden. "You two have accomplished a lot this morning," she remarked, surveying their progress. "Mr. McCall's teaching me to be a ranch hand," Thomas announced proudly. "He says I'm a natural." Tessa's eyes met Owen's over her son's head, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Is that so? Well, I'm glad to hear it. Every good ranch needs capable hands." "I was thinking," Owen said, accepting the dipper of water she offered, "that small as it is, this place has good potential for cattle. The creek provides reliable water, and the grass in that north pasture looks rich. You could start small, maybe 5 or 6 head, and build from there." Tessa's smile faded, replaced by a look of cautious interest. "James always said the same. But cattle cost money we don't have, and running a herd takes more hands than just one woman and a child." "True enough," Owen acknowledged. "But there are ways to start modest. And neighbors can help each other during roundup and branding." "You sound like you've given this some thought," Tessa observed, studying him. Owen shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Just thinking out loud. It's what I know." The moment was interrupted by Thomas, who had managed to get whitewash on his face and hands. "Mama, I'm hungry. Is it time for dinner yet?" Tessa laughed, the tension broken. "Yes, you little rascal, but you'll need to wash up first. Look at you." As Thomas ran to the water pump, Tessa turned back to Owen. "Thank you for encouraging him. He needs a man's influence in his life." "He's a good boy," Owen replied. "Smart too. Picks things up quickly." "Yes, he does." Tessa hesitated, then added softly, "including noticing the way certain people look at each other." Before Owen could respond, she had turned to follow her son, leaving him to wonder exactly what Thomas had observed, and whether he had shared those observations with his mother. The afternoon was spent completing the corral fence and beginning work on reinforcing the barn's supporting beams. By the time the sun began to set, Owen was pleasantly tired, his body aching from the physical labor but his mind clearer than it had been in months. After dinner, with Thomas once again tucked into bed, Owen and Tessa sat by the fire. The evening ritual was becoming familiar, comfortable in a way that both alarmed and attracted Owen. It would be easy to imagine many such evenings stretching into the future. "I've been thinking about what you said," Tessa began, her hands busy with mending. "About cattle." Owen looked up from the piece of wood he had been whittling a small horse for Thomas. "Oh, James left some money, not much, but enough that I've been able to keep us going this past year." She set her sewing aside, meeting his gaze directly. "I've been saving what I can, thinking of Thomas's future. Perhaps investing in a few head of cattle would be wiser than letting the money sit in a jar." Owen nodded slowly. "It could be if managed right. Cattle prices are good this year, but it's a risk, like any investment." "Life is risk," Tessa replied softly. "I learned that when James died and left me alone with a 5-year-old boy and a homestead to run." Owen studied her face in the firelight, seeing the determination beneath her gentle exterior. "You're not a woman who shies away from challenges, are you?" A small smile curved her lips. "I came west in a covered wagon with nothing but hope and a new husband. I buried that husband on this land we claimed together. I faced down blizzards, drought, and my own despair." She lifted her chin. "No, Mr. McCall, I don't shy away from challenges." The pride in her voice stirred something deep within Owen. This was a woman of remarkable strength, who had endured hardships that would have broken many others. Yet here she sat, still planning for the future, still dreaming of building something lasting. "If you're serious about cattle," he said, "I could help you select some good stock before I leave. Make sure you get fair prices. The word leave hung between them, a reminder that his stay was temporary. Tessa's fingers moved to her wedding ring, twisting it absently. When do you need to return to your outfit? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. End of the week, Owen replied. We're due to head back to Texas for another drive. Tessa nodded, her expression unreadable. And after that? Will you come this way again? The question held more meaning than its simple words suggested. Owen found himself at a crossroads, aware that his answer could set a course for both their futures. The outfit usually makes 2 drives a year to this territory, he said slowly. But a man can change his path, if he has reason enough. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and in that moment, Owen knew with certainty that his life would never be the same. Whether he returned to the trail or found a new direction, the woman sitting across from him had altered something fundamental within him. It's getting late, Tessa said finally, breaking the charged silence. I should turn in. Owen nodded, setting aside his whittling. I'll bank the fire before I head out to the lean-to. As she gathered her mending, Tessa paused beside his chair. Thank you, Owen. Not just for the work on the homestead, but for... She hesitated, searching for words. For reminding me that life goes on, that there can be new beginnings. Before he could respond, she had leaned down and pressed a soft, quick kiss to his cheek. Then she was gone, disappearing behind the curtain that separated her sleeping area from the main room. Owen sat motionless, his hand rising to touch the spot where her lips had been. The simple gesture had spoken volumes, confirming what he had begun to suspect, that Tessa's feelings for him were evolving beyond gratitude or friendship. And his own feelings? Owen stared into the dying embers of the fire, confronting the truth he had been avoiding. He was falling in love with Tessa Thornton. With her quiet strength, her determination, her gentle care for her son. With the life she was building from the ashes of her grief. But love was complicated by circumstances beyond their control. She was rooted here, tied to the homestead by both necessity and the memory of her husband. And Owen had commitments to the Blackwater outfit, men who depended on him, a life he had built over 9 years of hard work. As he made his way to the lean-to behind the barn, Owen found himself contemplating possibilities he had never seriously considered before. Could he give up the trail for a settled life? Could he become a rancher instead of a drover? Could he step into the role of husband and father, helping Tessa build the dream she had once shared with James? The questions followed him into sleep, where his dreams were filled with images of Tessa by firelight, her wedding ring glinting as she worked. The next day was Sunday, and Owen woke to find the homestead quieter than usual. When he approached the cabin, Tessa and Thomas were dressed in their best clothes, preparing to leave. We're going to church in town, Tessa explained, adjusting Thomas's collar. Would you like to join us? Owen hesitated. It had been years since he'd set foot in a church, and the thought of accompanying Tessa and Thomas into town, of being seen with them by the entire community, felt significant in ways he wasn't sure he was ready for. I think I'll stay here, he said finally. Continue work on the barn while it's quiet. Disappointment flickered briefly in Tessa's eyes, but she nodded. We'll be back by early afternoon. There's coffee on the stove if you want some. As they drove away in the small wagon, Thomas waving enthusiastically, Owen felt a strange emptiness descend. The homestead, which had felt so alive and purposeful over the past 2 days, seemed suddenly hollow without their presence. He worked steadily through the morning, reinforcing the barn structure and patching the remaining weak spots in the roof. The physical labor helped distract him from the thoughts that had plagued him through the night, but they returned with full force during his midday break. Sitting on the cabin's front step with a cup of coffee, Owen surveyed the small homestead. It wasn't much by most standards, a simple cabin, a weathered barn, a modest garden, and a few acres of grassland that could support a small herd at best. But there was potential here, and more importantly, there was a foundation for something meaningful. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew his attention. A rider was coming up the trail, not Tessa's wagon, but a man on horseback. Owen set aside his coffee and stood, one hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. As the rider drew closer, Owen recognized him as one of the hands from the Circle M ranch where the Blackwater outfit had delivered cattle. The man raised a hand in greeting as he approached. "McCall," he called, reining in his horse. "Thought that was you. Been looking all over for you." Owen stepped forward, concern furrowing his brow. "Something wrong at the Circle M?" The cowboy dismounted, removing his hat. "Not exactly. Got a message from your trail boss, Jenkins. There's been a change of plans. The outfit's heading out tomorrow instead of the end of the week. Jenkins wants all hands back at the ranch by nightfall." The news hit Owen like a physical blow. Tomorrow. Not 5 days from now, but tomorrow. His time with Tessa and Thomas was being cut short before he'd had a chance to sort through his conflicting feelings. "Did Jenkins say why the change?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice level. The cowboy shrugged. "Word of another outfit offering higher wages for drovers. Jenkins wants to get on the trail before he loses any more men." He eyed Owen curiously. "What are you doing out here anyway? This the Thornton place, ain't it?" "Helping with some repairs," Owen replied shortly, not wanting to elaborate. The cowboy nodded, though his expression remained curious. "Well, Jenkins was pretty clear. All hands back tonight, riding out at dawn." He remounted his horse. "You coming?" Owen glanced back at the half-finished repairs, thinking of Tessa and Thomas returning from church to find him gone. "I'll be there. Just need to finish up here first." The cowboy touched the brim of his hat. "I'll let Jenkins know." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped back down the trail, leaving Owen standing alone with the weight of decision heavy on his shoulders. By the time Tessa and Thomas returned from church, Owen had finished the most critical repairs to the barn and packed his meager belongings. The sight of their wagon coming up the trail filled him with a mixture of joy and dread. Thomas jumped down before the wagon had fully stopped. "Mr. McCall, Pastor Williams told a story about David and Goliath today. Have you ever heard it?" Owen smiled despite the heaviness in his heart. "I have indeed. Quite a tale of bravery, isn't it?" As Tessa descended from the wagon, her eyes immediately sought his, sensing something amiss in his demeanor. "Is everything all right?" Owen helped her down, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Thomas, why don't you check on those chickens? See if they've laid any eggs this afternoon." The boy looked between them, clearly sensing the tension, but nodded and ran off toward the chicken coop. Tessa watched him go, then turned back to Owen, concern evident in her eyes. "What is it?" Owen took a deep breath. "I had a visitor while you were gone. One of the hands from the Circle M. The Blackwater outfit is leaving tomorrow at dawn instead of the end of the week. I'm needed back tonight." Tessa's face fell, though she quickly composed herself. "I see. That's sooner than expected." "It is," Owen agreed, his voice rough with emotion he was struggling to contain. "I've finished the most important repairs to the barn. The roof will hold now, and the supporting beams are secure." Tessa nodded, her eyes downcast. "Thank you for all your help. I don't know what we would have done without you." "Tessa," Owen said softly, taking her hands in his. "These past few days, they've meant more to me than I can say." She looked up at him then, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "To me as well." Owen swallowed hard, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms. "I have to go back. The men count on me. But I want you to know that I'll be thinking of you and Thomas every day. Will we see you again? The question was barely audible, but it held all the hope and fear that Owen himself was feeling. Yes, he said with sudden conviction. Yes, you will. I don't know when or how, but I'll find my way back to you, Tessa. That's a promise. A single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. Owen reached up to brush it away, his callous thumb gentle against her soft skin. I'll hold you to that promise, cowboy, she whispered, attempting a smile. Owen hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I have something for you. For both of you, really. He withdrew a folded piece of paper and pressed it into her hand. It's not much, but it might help with that dream of cattle. Tessa unfolded the paper, her eyes widening as she read the contents. Owen, this is too much. I can't accept this. The paper contained a bank draft for $300, nearly all of Owen's savings from years of cattle drives. It was enough to purchase a small starter herd and still have money left over for feed and supplies. You can and you will, Owen said firmly. Consider it an investment in your future. In Thomas's future. He paused, then added softly, in our future, perhaps. The words hung between them, full of promise and uncertainty. Tessa looked up at him, searching his face. You really mean to come back? I do, Owen confirmed. This trail drive will take 3 months, maybe 4. But when it's done. He took a deep breath. When it's done, I'm thinking it might be time for this cowboy to hang up his spurs. Find a place to call home. Tessa's eyes shone with new tears, but these were accompanied by a smile that transformed her face. We'll be waiting, she said simply. The sound of Thomas returning from the chicken coop interrupted the moment. 3 eggs, Mama, he called proudly, hurrying toward them with his treasures carefully cradled in his hands. Owen crouched down to the boy's level. That's fine work, Thomas. You're a natural rancher, just like your pa wanted you to be. Thomas's face grew serious. Are you leaving, Mr. McCall? Owen nodded, unable to lie to the child. I have to go back to my outfit for a while, but I've made your mama a promise that I'll return. Do you promise me too? Thomas asked, his young face solemn. I promise you too, Owen said, holding out his hand to shake on it. Man to man. Thomas carefully transferred his eggs to one hand so he could shake Owen's. I'll help Mama while you're gone. I'll be the man of the house. I know you will, Owen replied, his throat tight with emotion. And when I come back, maybe we can start working on building that cattle herd your pa dreamed of. Thomas's eyes lit up. Really? Our own cows? Really? Owen confirmed, ruffling the boy's hair as he stood. But for now, why don't you take those eggs inside? I need to talk to your mama a bit more before I go. As Thomas ran to the cabin, Tessa turned to Owen. You've made his day. His year, possibly. I meant what I said. Owen told her. Both to him and to you. I'm coming back, Tessa. She nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to twist the wedding ring on her finger, a gesture Owen had come to recognize as a sign of her uncertainty or emotional turmoil. I believe you, she said quietly. But the trail is dangerous, Owen. And 3 months is a long time. Not so long, he countered. When there's something worth coming back for. Their eyes held, the connection between them almost tangible in the warm spring air. Owen wanted nothing more than to take her in his arms, to kiss her properly, to make his intentions clear beyond any doubt. But he held back, respecting the boundaries she had maintained as a grieving widow. I should get my things, he said finally, breaking the spell. It's a long ride back to the Circle M. Tessa nodded, composing herself. I'll pack you some food for the journey. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Owen saddled his horse and secured his bedroll and few possessions. Tessa had prepared a bundle of food biscuits, jerky, and some dried apples which he stowed in his saddlebag. Thomas stood solemnly beside his mother as Owen prepared to depart. The boy had given him a carefully drawn picture of a cowboy on a horse, which Owen had tucked securely into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. "Remember your promise," Thomas said, his small face serious. "You're coming back to help us with our cows." "I remember," Owen assured him, crouching down for one last handshake. "You take care of your mama until I return." "I will," Thomas vowed. "I'm the man of the house." Owen straightened, his eyes finding Tessa's. So much remained unsaid between them, feelings that had grown in the fertile soil of shared work and quiet evenings by the fire. "Walk with me to the end of the trail?" he asked softly. Tessa nodded, turning to Thomas. "Go inside and wash up for dinner, sweetheart. I'll be back in a few minutes." The boy looked between them knowingly but obeyed without protest, running to the cabin with one last wave to Owen. Leading his horse, Owen walked beside Tessa down the trail that led from the homestead to the main road. Neither spoke until they reached the junction, the point where he would turn south toward the Circle M. "I meant what I said about the money," Owen said, breaking the silence. "Use it to start building your herd. By the time I return, you could have the beginnings of a real ranch." Tessa stopped, turning to face him. "The money means a great deal, Owen. But it's not why I'll be waiting for your return." Owen's heart quickened at her words. "Tessa, I know it's soon. I know you're still grieving James. But these past few days have shown me possibilities I never considered before. A life beyond the trail. A home. A family." Tessa's hand moved to her wedding ring. But this time, instead of twisting it anxiously, she slowly removed it from her finger. She looked at it for a long moment, the gold band catching the light of the setting sun. "James gave me this ring when I was 18 years old," she said softly. "It represented all our hopes and dreams for the future. For 7 years, it's been a symbol of my commitment to him, to the life we built together." She paused, closing her hand around the ring. "But James is gone, and I'm still here. Thomas is still here. And we need to live, not just survive." She looked up at Owen, her blue eyes clear and direct. "I'm not ready to make any promises beyond waiting for your return. But when you come back, Owen McCall, I'll be here. And we'll see where this path leads us." Owen nodded, understanding and respecting her cautious approach. "That's all I ask. A chance to see where the path leads." Tessa slipped the ring into her pocket, her hand now bare where it had worn the symbol of her marriage for so long. The gesture was not a rejection of her past, Owen knew, but an opening to her future, a future that might include him. "May I?" he asked quietly, stepping closer. Tessa nodded, her eyes never leaving his as he leaned down to press his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but filled with promise, a commitment sealed without words. When they parted, Owen saw in her eyes the same mix of hope and uncertainty that he felt in his own heart. It was enough. It had to be enough to sustain them through the months ahead. "I'll send word when I can," he promised, mounting his horse. "And I'll be back before the first snow flies." Tessa stood on the road, her figure illuminated by the golden light of the setting sun. "We'll be waiting, cowboy." With a final nod, Owen turned his horse south, his heart both heavy with parting and light with anticipation. The trail ahead was long, but for the first time in his life, he rode with a destination beyond the next cattle town, a homestead where a woman and her son would be waiting for his return. The summer of 1878 stretched long and hot across the Montana Territory. At the Thornton homestead, life settled into a rhythm of hard work and cautious hope as Tessa and Thomas prepared for a future that now held new possibilities. With Owen's generous investment, Tessa had purchased 6 head of cattle, 4 heifers, and 2 steers, forming the modest beginning of the herd James had dreamed of building. Mrs. Hollister's son, Frank, helped with the heavier work of fencing the north pasture and constructing a proper watering trough. But it was Thomas who took the greatest pride in their new livestock. Each morning, the boy would race to the pasture to count the cattle, ensuring none had wandered off during the night. He named each one, speaking to them as if they were old friends, telling them stories about Mr. McCall and the grand ranch they would build together when he returned. Tessa watched her son's transformation with a mixture of joy and trepidation. Thomas had attached himself firmly to the promise of Owen's return, his young mind constructing elaborate fantasies about their future as a family. She worried about the possibility of disappointment, knowing all too well how precarious life could be, especially for a man on the dangerous cattle trails. Yet in her own heart, Tessa nurtured a similar hope. The memory of Owen's kiss, brief though it had been, lingered in her thoughts during the quiet evenings after Thomas was asleep. The wedding ring that had adorned her finger for so long now rested in a small box beside her bed, not forgotten, but set aside as a treasured memento of a chapter in her life that had closed. In late June, a letter arrived from Owen. The paper was creased and smudged from its long journey, but the words brought a smile to Tessa's face as she read them aloud to Thomas. Dear Tessa and Thomas, I hope this letter finds you both well. We've just crossed into Texas after a long drive from Montana. The cattle arrived at market in good condition, and the boss was pleased enough to give us all a bonus. I've enclosed a bank draft for another $100. Perhaps you can add a few more head to your growing herd. Thomas, I hope you're helping your mother with those cattle. Remember what I told you about checking their water every day, especially in this summer heat. A good rancher always puts his animals' needs first. Tessa, I think of you often. The nights on the trail are long, but the stars remind me of the promise I made. The outfit is preparing for another drive north in late August. With luck and good weather, we should reach Montana by early October. Until then, know that my thoughts are with you both. Yours, Owen. Thomas had insisted on keeping the letter under his pillow, rereading it each night before bed. Tessa understood his attachment. The written words were tangible proof of Owen's intention to return, a lifeline to the future they were all beginning to envision. As July turned to August, the small herd thrived on the rich Montana grass. One of the heifers was showing signs of pregnancy, a development that thrilled Thomas to no end. Our first calf, Mama, he exclaimed when Frank Hollister confirmed their suspicions. Wait until Mr. McCall hears about this. Tessa had used some of the additional money Owen sent to purchase lumber for expanding the corral and reinforcing the barn in preparation for winter. The homestead was slowly transforming, becoming more substantial with each improvement. When Owen returned, if he returned, the cautious part of her mind whispered he would find a place that was beginning to resemble the ranch James had envisioned. The thought of her late husband no longer brought the sharp pain it once had. Instead, Tessa felt a gentle melancholy, a recognition of what had been lost tempered by gratitude for what they had shared. James would always be Thomas's father, always a part of the foundation upon which their lives were built. But the future that was taking a shape James could never have foreseen. In late September, as the first hints of autumn tinged the cottonwood leaves with gold, Tessa found herself watching the road more frequently, hoping for a glimpse of a rider approaching from the south. According to Owen's letter, the cattle drive should be nearing Montana territory by now. Do you think he'll come today, Mama? Thomas asked one morning as they collected eggs from the chicken coop. Tessa smoothed his hair, smiling gently. I don't know, sweetheart. The cattle drives don't run on precise schedules. But he promised to come before the first snow, and Mr. McCall strikes me as a man who keeps his promises. Thomas nodded, satisfied with her answer. I'm going to show him our cows. Do you think he'll be proud of how I've taken care of them? I'm sure he will, Tessa assured him, her heart warming at her son's eagerness. That evening, as Tessa prepared dinner, The sound of hoofbeats on the trail caught her attention. Her heart leaped, but she cautioned herself against premature hope. It could be Frank Hollister, or perhaps the peddler who occasionally made his rounds through the scattered homesteads. Thomas had no such reservations. He bolted from the table where he had been setting plates, flinging open the door before Tessa could stop him. "Mr. McCall!" His joyous shout confirmed what Tessa's heart already knew. She moved to the doorway, one hand clutching the wooden frame for support as she watched Owen dismount, dropping to one knee to receive Thomas's enthusiastic embrace. The sight of him travel-worn but smiling broadly as he listened to Thomas's rapid-fire update on the cattle made her breath catch. When Owen looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, his smile softened, becoming something more intimate, more meaningful. He rose to his feet, keeping one hand on Thomas's shoulder as they approached the cabin together. "Tessa," he said simply, removing his hat as he reached the steps. "You came back," she replied, her voice steadier than she had expected. "I promised I would." His eyes held hers, conveying without words all that had remained unspoken between them. Thomas tugged at Owen's hand. "Come see our cows. One's going to have a baby soon." Owen laughed, breaking the moment of intensity between him and Tessa. "I'd like nothing better, partner. But maybe we should let your mama say hello properly first." Tessa felt a blush rise to her cheeks at his words and the knowing look in his eyes. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, gesturing toward the cabin. "You must be hungry after your journey." "Starving," Owen admitted with a grin. "Trail food gets mighty tiresome after a few months." As they entered the cabin together, Tessa was struck by how right it felt, Owen's tall figure filling the small space, Thomas chattering excitedly between them, the three of them moving around the table as if they had been doing so for years rather than minutes. Over dinner, Owen shared stories of the cattle drive, carefully editing the more dangerous episodes for Thomas's benefit. The boy hung on every word, asking questions about Texas, about the different towns they had passed through, about the other cowboys in the outfit. "And are you staying now?" Thomas finally asked, the question Tessa had been both longing and fearing to hear. Owen set down his coffee cup, his expression growing serious. "Well, that depends on a few things, partner." "What things?" Thomas pressed, leaning forward eagerly. Owen's eyes flickered to Tessa before returning to the boy. "Important things. Things your mama and I need to discuss properly." He smiled reassuringly. "But I didn't ride all the way back here just to turn around and leave again, if that's what you're worried about." Thomas seemed satisfied with this answer, and soon after, despite his protests, it was time for him to go to bed. He insisted that Owen tell him a bedtime story, a request that was granted with good-natured acquiescence. Tessa listened from the main room as Owen's deep voice recounted a tale of a brave young ranch hand who saved a herd from rustlers. Thomas's occasional questions grew fewer and further between until they ceased altogether, replaced by the even breathing of sleep. When Owen emerged from behind the curtain, he found Tessa by the fire, her hands busy with mending but her mind clearly elsewhere. "He's asleep," Owen said softly, settling into the chair across from her. "Fought it hard, but the day's excitement finally caught up with him." Tessa set aside her sewing, suddenly unable to concentrate on the task. "He's missed you terribly." "We both have." Owen leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I missed you too. More than I thought possible." He paused, studying her face in the firelight. "You've stopped wearing your ring." Tessa's hand moved instinctively to her bare finger. "Yes, it seemed. It was time." Owen nodded, understanding the significance of the gesture. "The homestead looks good. You've done a lot with the money." "Your investment," Tessa corrected with a small smile. "As you called it. The best investment I ever made," Owen replied, his voice low and earnest. If it helped bring me back to this moment, to you. The directness of his words sent a flutter through Tessa's chest. And what moment is this exactly? She asked, needing to hear him articulate what had been building between them since that first day outside Barker's store. Owen rose from his chair, moving to kneel beside her. Taking her hands in his, he looked up into her eyes. The moment I ask you if there's room in your life, in your heart, for a travel-worn cowboy who's finally found something worth settling down for. Tessa felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. There's been room waiting for you, Owen McCall. I think perhaps there has been since the day you slipped my wedding ring back on my finger and told me some things are worth more than their weight in gold. Owen's hands tightened around hers. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You and Thomas, you're worth everything to me. He took a deep breath. I've left the Blackwater outfit, Tessa. Rode away with my full wages and my boss's blessing. I'm not going back to the trail. The magnitude of his decision left Tessa momentarily speechless. But the trail has been your life for 9 years, she finally managed. Are you sure this is what you want? I've never been more certain of anything, Owen assured her. The trail was my life because I had nothing else to call my own. Now I do, or at least I hope I do. The question in his eyes was unmistakable. Tessa slipped one hand free to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You do, she whispered. If you'll have us, me and Thomas, and this small homestead with its 6 cattle and endless work, then yes, we're yours. Owen's smile was brilliant in the firelight. That's all I want. A chance to build something lasting with you. To help Thomas grow into the man his father would have been proud of. To wake up each morning knowing exactly where I belong. And where is that? Tessa asked, though she already knew the answer. Right here, Owen replied simply. With you. He rose slightly, just enough to bring his face level with hers. This time, when their lips met, there was no hesitation, no brief touch and parting. This was a kiss that spoke of homecoming, of promise fulfilled, of a future unfolding before them. When they finally parted, Owen reached into his pocket. I have something for you, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that Tessa found endearing. From his pocket, he withdrew a small object that caught the firelight with a golden gleam. A ring not elaborate or fancy, but a simple band much like the one she had once tried to sell. I know it's not much, Owen said, suddenly self-conscious. And I know it's soon. If you're not ready, I understand. But I wanted you to know that my intentions are honorable and permanent. Tessa looked from the ring to Owen's face, seeing in his eyes all the love and commitment she had longed for but scarcely dared to hope might be hers again. Ask me properly, she whispered, her heart pounding. Owen took her left hand, the ring poised at the tip of her finger. Tessa Thornton, will you marry me? Will you let me be a husband to you and a father to Thomas? Will you build a life with me on this land that holds both your past and our future? Tears spilled freely down Tessa's cheeks now, but her voice was steady as she answered, Yes, Owen McCall. Yes to all of it. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the same finger where he had once returned her wedding band, Tessa felt the completion of a circle that had begun that day outside Barker's store. From a moment of desperation had grown a love that promised to sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Owen sealed their engagement with another kiss, this one filled with the promise of all the kisses to follow in the years to come. From behind the curtain came a small voice. Does this mean Mr. McCall is staying forever, Mama? They broke apart, laughing at Thomas's perfect timing. Yes, sweetheart, Tessa called back. Mr. McCall is staying forever. Now go back to sleep. Good, came the satisfied reply. I told Blossom and the other cows he would. Owen chuckled, his arm sliding around Tessa's waist. Smart boy. Already knows what's what. He takes after his father, Tessa said softly, then clarified. After James. And soon after you too. Owen's expression grew serious. I'll never try to replace James in his memory, Tessa. Or in yours. What you had with him was special and should be honored. I know, Tessa assured him, touched by his understanding. But Thomas needs a father now, not just a memory. And I need a partner, a husband. She leaned her head against his shoulder. We need you, Owen, just as you are. They sat together by the fire late into the night, planning their future. They would marry before the first snow, giving them the winter to settle into their new life as a family. Come spring, they would use Owen's savings to expand the herd, perhaps purchase additional land to the north where the grazing was particularly good. It won't be easy, Owen cautioned. Building a ranch from scratch takes years of hard work and more than a little luck. Nothing worthwhile comes easy, Tessa replied. But we'll have each other, and Thomas, and our 6 cows, one of which is expecting. She smiled up at him. It's more than many people start with. It's everything, Owen agreed, kissing her forehead. Everything I never knew I wanted until I saw a woman trying to sell her wedding ring to feed her son. 2 weeks later, on a crisp October morning with the aspen trees blazing gold against a clear blue sky, Owen McCall and Tessa Thornton were married in the small church in Cottonwood Creek. Thomas stood proudly at Owen's side, wearing his Sunday best and beaming as the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Mrs. Hollister wept openly during the ceremony, later declaring to anyone who would listen that she had known from the first day Owen McCall rode onto the Thornton homestead that he was there to stay. Saw it in his eyes, she insisted, the way he looked at her. Some things are just meant to be. The small reception was held at the Hollister farm, with neighbors from miles around coming to wish the new family well. There were gifts of preserves and quilts, offers of help with the spring planting, and warm welcomes for Owen into the close-knit community of homesteaders. As the celebration wound down and the newly formed McCall family prepared to return to their homestead, Frank Hollister approached with one final gift, a handsome bull calf, just weaned. To add to your herd, he said, clapping Owen on the shoulder. Every good ranch needs strong bloodlines. Owen thanked him with a firm handshake, his other arm wrapped securely around Tessa's waist. We'll put him to good use, he promised. The McCall ranch is just getting started. Thomas, overhearing this, tugged at Owen's sleeve. Is that what we're going to call it? The McCall ranch. Owen looked down at his new stepson, then at his wife. What do you think, Tessa? The McCall ranch has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Tessa smiled, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had transformed their lives with a simple act of kindness. I think it's perfect. The McCall ranch it is. As they drove home in the wagon, Thomas between them on the seat, Tessa leaned her head against Owen's shoulder. The gold band on her finger, not her old wedding ring, but the new one Owen had placed there just hours before caught the late afternoon sunlight. Happy? Owen asked softly, his lips close to her ear. Completely, Tessa replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. That night, after Thomas was asleep, husband and wife stood on the porch of their cabin, looking out at the land that was now truly theirs, not just Tessa's inheritance from James, but their shared future, their legacy to Thomas and any children that might follow. Do you ever regret it? Tessa asked, nestled against Owen's chest. Giving up the trail for this? Owen's arms tightened around her. Not for a single moment. The trail was what I did, not who I was. This you, Thomas, our home, our land, this is who I am meant to be. As if to emphasize his words, a soft whicker came from the pasture where their small herd grazed contentedly, including the newest addition, the bull calf that would one day sire the next generation of McCall cattle. I love you, Owen McCall, Tessa said, turning in his arms to face him. For the man you were when you first saw me at my lowest moment, and for the man you are now, standing beside me at my highest. And I love you, Tessa McCall, he replied, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue, for seeing in me something worth waiting for, worth believing in. Their kiss was a promise renewed, a covenant sealed not just with words spoken before a minister, but with the deeper understanding of two hearts that had found in each other the perfect complement, the missing piece that made them whole. As winter descended on the Montana Territory, bringing with it howling blizzards and bitter cold, the small cabin on the McCall Ranch remained warm and filled with love. The barn, now properly repaired, sheltered their growing herd, including the new calf born in early December, the first animal to enter the world as a McCall cow from birth. Spring would bring new challenges and opportunities. There would be fences to mend, fields to plow, cattle to brand. There would be hard work from sunup to sundown, the endless tasks of building a ranch worthy of the name. But there would also be joy in shared meals around the table, in Thomas's growing confidence under Owen's patient guidance, in quiet moments by the fire when the day's work was done. There would be the satisfaction of creating something lasting, something that would outlive them both. And through it all, there would be the knowledge that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the smallest acts of kindness, like a cowboy who saw a woman selling her wedding ring, slipped it back on her finger, and kept it there until she was ready to replace it with his own.